Keeping with today's theme of exploring the future of the beer industry, I think it's really important to have an understanding of emerging trends in marketing and understand where the dollars are shifting. Outside of the alcohol industry, clothing companies and food brands and restaurants and retail stores and airlines and tech startups, I mean, you name it, they're all advertising heavily on digital platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. They're working with influencers. They have customer acquisition strategies built specifically around this idea that there's an intersection between commerce and content. And they've shifted a lot of their spending away from traditional marketing in an effort to reach consumers where they are. We've heard that a couple times today. And we know that that's online. We know that it's digital. So what does a quality digital campaign look like? And how can today's emerging alcohol brands think about crafting a cost-effective marketing strategy that not only enhances their message to their existing fans, but also gives them an opportunity to expand their audience and acquire new customers in the process. So here today to discuss the future of marketing and how beer companies can tap into digital and influencer strategies are Uinta Brewing CMO Jeremy Ragonese and Omnicomm Media Managing Director Darrell Jursa. Coming up, guys.
What's up, buddy? That's great walk-on music, man. Is that the stuff that you use for the volleyball tournament after this, too? I mean,
we were actually talking about having like a raging pool party after,
awesome.
you know?
That's good.
Maybe next year we'll think about
one
that.
session after this, right? And then it's the volleyball
Would Uinta
tournament.
sponsor it if we did?
I'm pretty sure we would, but I'm looking at the punch-out competition. I think that's actually a
nice.
really cool addition.
All right, well, I don't want to fight you, so. Thank you guys for joining. Darrell, this is your world right now, really figuring out how to tap
bullshit
in.
bingo lingo, like future of marketing, a little bit of this, a little buzzword there and that. Yeah, it's a lot of stuff.
Buzzword souffle coming up for the next 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
And I know this is your world, Darrell, but I actually want to start with Jeremy because I think most people in the room are probably going to be able to, understand kind of where a brewery comes at this from a little bit better. Broadly speaking, what's been Uinta's marketing strategy and what's been your experience as the company has pivoted at least some of its spend towards consumers in the digital and mobile spaces?
Sure. I think maybe a little perspective is helpful just for folks to understand that Uinta's been around for around, by the way, it's pronounced Uinta, just so everyone knows that. That's always one of the hardest things. I think today, just introductions with other people, I've heard Uinta pronounced 10 different ways, which is always a difficult thing when your own brand name is a little bit difficult to say. So it was one of those things where Uinta has gone through some similar process changes and some basically a complete introspection look. It was interesting to hear from Carol and Nikos this morning that really began for them around 2014. I think Uinta was about the same timeline for it. And really, in looking at all the processes and the things that had gone on within the industry, and at that point in time, the founder had decided to exit the stage and bring in a financial partner and some other things. It was really an opportunity for Uinta to start looking at ways we were doing things. How could we enhance? How can we get better? What could we bring to the table? I joined about a year ago, and at that point in time, Uinta had just undergone a complete packaging overhaul, a little bit of research just in terms of underscoring the positioning that they had already nurtured for all those 20 years, but ultimately they were still operating under the same processes and things that had brought them to that level. So day one, really, for me, my very first conversation out of the gate was about innovation. So a lot of what I've spent the last year on has really been a lot of discussion, a lot of planning, frankly, a lot of research around innovation, primarily putting the customer at the center of that conversation, finding out ways we can deliver products that are more meaningful to today and tomorrow's drinkers, and ultimately, if we didn't have it in our portfolio now, how could we start working on a systematic process to be able to deliver that in the future? So, innovation's one way which we've really invested a lot of time, but really the marketing that we're doing today and the pivot that we made just shortly after I joined was around primarily trade marketing, specifically to support a very rapidly growing sales team and a rapid expansion nationally with our portfolio. And then the other piece of it was really about customer acquisition. How can we bring new drinkers to Uinta Brewing Company, and how can we reach those drinkers in the most efficient way possible?
Darrell, what's the best way to acquire a customer in today's world?
Really? You're going to drop that one?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
What's the best way to acquire a customer? Well, I mean, look, there's so much out there. I mean, I've spent the majority of my career in the beverage business, so it's, you know, there's a lot of different ways, and so I guess maybe one way to attack that question would be, you know, you're focused on innovation, right? And we talked a little bit before this session about, you know, how have you acquired all of the data and information, right? I mean, that's the buzzword, right? Data everywhere, not a drop to drink. I mean, that's what we say, because it's a situation where you need to package it up and use it. And so even before you think about tactics, it's a good idea to develop the right personas. You know, you all have probably heard that word before, like a profile, right? Trying to figure it out, trying to get an understanding of what an 18 to 22-year-old is doing. And I say 18 because you still need to figure out how people are coming into a particular franchise. They're not an LDA yet, but you got to figure that out. So the best thing to do first and foremost is gather up everything that you have and package it up so that you know what you are dealing with, right? We always like to say, and this is something that just completely frosts my ass, like everybody says sizing the prize, right, in media. You know, let's put together segments and targets and size the prize, when the reality is we got to figure out how to acquire them, right? And so how do you figure out how to acquire them without understanding what that persona is? So it could be search data, right? Could be ComScore clickstream. So where does somebody go online? You know, where are they shopping offline? What are they doing in their off time? Like what's the picture of this person first and foremost? So before you get to that tactic, you gotta package up who that persona is. And there's different ones based on flavors. You know, there's different personas based on brands. So that would be the first thing to do before you get anywhere about talking about acquisition.
Yeah, figure out your audience.
It really is, and I think that was one of the key learnings from my experience coming into Uinta and really sitting down and not just understanding who we've been, but also who we think we should become, because ultimately the industry has changed rapidly. We need to continue to grow. I like to say, you know, it's not about continually slicing the pie in ever smaller pieces. We need to actually grow the pie. We've heard a lot of breweries talking about that, kind of breaking through, reaching new drinkers, bringing them into the segment more often, more occasions. How can we grow the occasions where beverage alcohol intersects with that consumer? And ultimately, so we had to decide for ourselves what direction we were going to go into. What we're really good at, frankly, is making highly drinkable beers at still having good flavor, still being able to be approachable. Utah has presented that opportunity for us. Yep. Thank you, Utah state laws. But ultimately, that's where we've put a lot more of our investment in time and research, is trying to make just a fantastic drinkable beer that ultimately those consumers are going to be drawn to us because of the personality, the brand, the persona. And we have done more research around specifically identifying the consumers we think we have the ability to reach.
Anything cool? Sorry, I'm just curious.
Take over.
Anything cool that you found out about a particular drinker, like a difference between like a stout or a Kolsch, or you know, when somebody's pantry loading versus, you know,
Sure.
consumption?
Yeah, no, it really does have a lot to do with the usage occasion. You know, the consumer that chooses a particular beverage around a certain period of time, what their engagement is with that particular beverage is determined by, you know, is it going to be a social occasion? Is it a personal occasion? Is it paired with food? All the other elements that can come into that. Ultimately, we already have a bit of a lifestyle brand. People are very active. We reflect that in the brand personality that we've built. So ultimately, we're choosing brands and choosing to identify our products with people who are active and involved. A lot of times they'll have a beer after the end of a ski run, or if they're going to be going out on the beach, things of that nature. So we want to to be part of that cooler filling kind of occasion, and we want those customers to find that kind of refreshment from our portfolio.
So it sounds like, so back to that question originally, like about how do you acquire it? Sounds like you're sort of doing a full funnel. You know, you're starting, you've got great equity in the state of Utah, everybody talks about it, but then you bring it down to post-skiing, right? It's simple,
Sure.
but how do you activate around a skiing occasion, in-store, online, offline, like however you want to do it? So
Yep.
it sounds like you're getting there so far.
We're working on it. Like I said, it's a fairly new bit for us, and ultimately, we see our pivot. This is probably what your conversation point is going to be more about. We see a pivot to being able to reach those consumers more often online than we are offline, and part of that is we want to be able to marry those experiences because that's the point of consumption. That's the ability to reach them when they hit the shelves. But they are more often actively engaging with our brand, and we see it in terms of just the general benefit of being able to reach those consumers is going to be happening online more often.
We'll go back to that word reach in a little bit. Yeah.
And you've already started that pivot somewhat and shifted some of the dollars towards, paid social and influencers. Can you talk to me a little bit about your experience doing that?
Sure. It really, for us, it's been a little bit of a dip a toe in here, dip a finger over there, because what we have from a resource standpoint is going to be fairly limited. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of things that are going towards supporting our sales organization. Those were the immediate needs, the things that we could attack right away because we knew how to do that within our own internal resources. I've reached out to other partners. I'm glad to meet you, of course. So we get a chance to...
What's your media budget like?
It's not nearly enough for Omnicomm, I'll tell you that. But what I would like to do, of course, is to put more dollars into online primarily because we see how we can engage with consumers is more meaningful in more different ways. So what we've done this year has been testing. We've done, of course, paid social. We've done some other campaigns, some influencer type campaigns, and we can go into detail on that in a little bit. But ultimately, we're putting more dollars into digital versus just broad campaigns, national.
Darrell, for a company of Uinta's size, how would you recommend they think about their marketing budget as it relates to a digital spend? And I want to get back to what I mentioned in the introduction, which is this idea of an intersection between commerce and content, which is one of your big talking points. How would that look? What would that look like for a company the size of Uinta that's operating on a pretty limited budget?
Yeah, well, listen, I'm going to put my recovering integrated marketer hat on for a moment because, I've been working at a media agency for about 2 years now, so it's the first media agency I've worked at, and so it's an interesting time to be in media because we own a lot of the data from a communications perspective. Now, going back to data real quick, how are you going to budget it? And it's a simple construct. Get discovered, get considered, get sales, and get love. So get discovered is all about being available, right? That's pretty simple and straightforward in terms of a word in this space, but it's also making certain that you're available to be seen on the digital shelf, right? Right now, we're working a lot with Amazon. We're working with a lot of other retail.com partners, right, including Drizzly, places where you can see a package. You're not exactly able to do much with it until you go to a place where you can exact a transaction. But getting discovered is that first step, and a lot of the dollars are being pushed towards getting discovered and being available, and we call that brand. Right? It's all about brand media, brand marketing, awareness generating, some soft and maybe some hard metrics. Discovered is all about, that's discovered. Considered is all about that moment where people are considering something. And there's an adage in our business where everybody always thinks a target is shopping. Right? So there's no difference between like a member of an audience who's just an audience just wandering around the earth and somebody who's ready to shop. But there is a nuance to that. There's people who come in and out of a shopping occasion, right? So the considered portion is incredibly important, and that's where you start to think about platforms where you can showcase video content, right? Behind the scenes of a brewery, like putting up like a little 5 or 10-second vertical video on Facebook, supporting that. If you're launching a 750 line of upscale or premium or something on premise in a 1.6 barrel, like it would be good to show the behind the scenes on that and get people to consider that on a platform like Facebook or even YouTube. Even though YouTube's having some problems now, it's still the best platform out there for video, even though Facebook is making its way. The get sales, the third part of it and how you budget, that has a lot to do what you're doing from an activation perspective. You're doing it in-store, off, or you're doing an event. You're spending the money to support some digital activity to get people somewhere to maybe try it, to figure out if they're into this new beer. And then Get Love is all about CRM. It's all about taking your email list, cleansing it, making certain that you keep it up to date. You're talking to people a little bit more. You're getting it out there. That's not a lot of money to be spent there, but you're at least paying attention. So you could spend across all those different buckets in different ways and try things on for size. We talked about before this session, how are you enhancing what you're doing, how are you expanding it, and how are you experimenting it. So if you budget according to tactics that sit in each of those discovered, considered, sales, love, then you have an opportunity to really validate some of your spend. So underneath each of those steps, you actually have measures. You have ways to look at things. So look, I deal with a lot of big brands, but I come from a small brand world. Tony Balker's out in the audience. I used to work for that guy at Goose Island, so it was fun. So there's a lot of different ways that you can spend the money efficiently. But and the good news is you can measure anything now. You really can. So that's kind of a way to go about budgeting and thinking about things.
Yeah, and the way that your clients think about commerce, you talked about this idea of connecting the content that you're building, whether it's an Instagram post or a Facebook video or whatever, to some type of transaction, which you define as commerce. How do your clients define commerce? Is it a physical transaction buying a product, or is it something else?
It's Bitcoin now, right?
Well, right, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Cryptocurrency, it's the new thing, yeah. Every client's different. In fact, I was just answering an email about this. Some folks out here in LA were looking for case studies to share with a client. And, we've got food clients, we've got, insurance clients, and ultimately they all look at it a little bit differently. The way that we're defining it is some semblance of a transaction of value. So it could be demand gen, like you're getting emails around a particular campaign. Another is, you're sending people to a website to get something, to buy something. And so the definition is dependent on the client. What's great about it, once you rally around that, and we've even got like retailers that we do business with, once you rally around what that key performance indicator is, or the KPI, see I actually spelled it out for everybody. Once you determine what that is, then it's a lot easier to determine what that transaction is. But it's got to be some semblance of a transaction, and everything should be about performance and transactions now. You shouldn't throw money away just to expect your video to appear in a news feed. We've got clients that are interested in shoppable video, where you can actually see a video and you click through it and it takes you to a website to buy something. So there's a lot of technology there. There's a lot of different tactics that you do stuff, but you got to rally around a singular KPI. Otherwise, everybody just starts trying stuff and it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I see it too also as an exchange of value. That transaction I think is an important piece of it. When you exchange value, sometimes those can be the opportunity for a consumer to discover your brand. You learn a piece of information, or you're able to garner a piece of information then becomes an asset for your organization. And I hear you talking about the customer journey. I think that's so important for people to realize. A lot of times that each phase, there is a different transaction that's taking place. Yeah. And so, the commerce level can kind of continue to increase each time. The value, certainly from a lifetime perspective, will continue to increase. The brand I work for today has a lot of love and loyalty in its local market, so I have to speak differently there. But in Boston, we're fairly unknown, so we have to really work on a different element. We use a different strategy. We're certainly changing the kinds of resources that we put in place for that. But I'll use example of a promotion we were a part of earlier this year. I like to say I'm making good decisions, but this one happened to me purely by accident. We had been a partnership, or had a partnership with a PR firm just briefly, and it was more or less around, again, the outdoor lifestyle and just brands that were like-minded and similarly associated. And they had asked us, because of our National Parks series that we launched with Golden Ale earlier this year, we received a lot of positive press on and had some great momentum with those brands. They had asked us to participate in essentially an Instagram promotion for one of their other clients. One of their other clients happened to be JetBlue. So we couldn't give them beer, we gave them some swag and walked away thinking we were just going to be part of a group of brands that were affiliated with JetBlue. JetBlue was going to get 100% of the brand love for that, as well they should have. It was their program. But what ended up happening for us is that all of the consumers that signed up for that particular promotion opted into an email list, and that email list was shared among the partners. Now we have to send them the warm welcome and the possibility of being able to reach out to them in the future. We're going to see that list drop off pretty significantly. But to a lot of those people, that's the very first time they've ever heard of Uinta Brewing Company. So the value for me as a marketer is that I can speak to them now on a regular basis, hopefully on a repeat basis, if I can earn more of their business.
Don't be creepy, trust. Man. Don't be creepy.
Don't be that guy.
Yeah.
Try not to be that guy.
Yeah.
But that gets me very excited because now all of a sudden the transaction, the value of that transaction is higher. So that's a different kind of commerce, but it certainly gives us the opportunity to earn their business.
And I'll add, like, look, the intersection of content and commerce, like there's so many different ad units out there, you wouldn't even know they're an ad unit. Right, the days of like typical display ads are gone. Like look at Snap, right? I mean Snapchat, there's video, like there's the lines are blurring between what is an ad and what is actual just enjoyable, like whatever the content is, because the hope is that the advertiser makes enjoyable content, right? So there's a line that's blurring, and it comes up again and again in client meetings where they're like, well, do I repurpose my TV commercial? Or do I repurpose this photo? Or do I take this user-generated stuff that I paid an influencer for and use it? And the answer is yes to pretty much all of that, but you've got to nuance it so that you're hitting more than one channel. You can't just, the days of repurposing something and putting it up on your Facebook page without paying to promote it are over. The algorithms don't let anybody see anything without paying money. I mean, that's good for me from a job security perspective, but you can be smart and you can still do organic stuff. You just have to do it a little smarter and make certain that you include offline with online.
Yeah. How do you start thinking about the types of platforms that you want to advertise on or market on?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there, right? I mean,
yeah.
I just mentioned one, so Snap, Facebook, Instagram. I mean, Pinterest is a sleeper. I think you reserve the right to look at every single one of them because they're going to come at you and say, we're big with 18 to 34-year-olds in fashion. Sweet, that's a big swath. In the world of data and intelligence, 18 to 34, I mean, does a 34-year-old want to be 18 again and vice versa? I mean, I don't know. You know, there's a lot of, and it goes back to the personas. And so you have to ground yourself in who the hell your audience is first, and then you can start talking to platforms. It's great to learn from them too, especially if you're small. You can invite them in, or you can go to listen to them, or go to SlideShare and see what some of these platforms put up in terms of data. They put out studies. They give it to just about everybody. I mean, Google's big. I mean, go on to Think with Google. There's a lot of information there that they give away for free. But a lot of these platforms, there's a lot of minimum buy-in for stuff. And a lot of them are also self-service. So you can go in to the platform and try some things on for size. But again, before you go anywhere near a platform, decide whether or not you want to do Snapchat. I would say for alcohol, we've tried some things and it's worked. But Instagram's better, right? Facebook is obviously also good. When it comes to Pinterest, I'm telling you, that's called like the digital version of the FSI. You know, it really is. I mean, they've done a really great job, and they're sleepers with what they're doing. You know, I don't have their stock, and I don't know anybody who works there outside of people that I do business with, but it's really a great and interesting platform to take a look at. So I'd say focus on the audience before you go there, but learn as much as you can about some of these platforms. The information is just out there. You can check it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
how much more of a challenge is it for alcohol companies to think about their digital marketing efforts because of the regulatory hurdles that they'll need to sort of overcome, making vetting the sort of audience that it's being served to? I know that's like a big concern on Snapchat.
Well, it is, yeah. I mean, and so that's why I said I think we test and learn, but a lot of the work is done around search, a lot of video work, because a lot of the work that we do is supported by broadcast. Because there's an intense amount of reporting, like a daily reporting, like a dashboard around what's going on and what's doing, not just monitoring what ads people are consuming, but also what they're saying about things, so social conversation monitoring, all of that. There's a huge brand safety effort where you actually have people manually looking at where content is being served on behalf of the brand. So, the regulatory thing, from a website perspective, that's age-gated, so you have that, but you also are able to target specific audiences on these platforms to make certain that the people won't see ads if they're not of LDA.
Yeah. Jeremy, how do you balance the desire to, want to experiment with some of these platforms and, kind of move your marketing dollars in that direction with, I guess the feeling that you need to continue spending against more traditional forms of marketing?
Sure, that's one of the difficult decisions, of course, and a lot of times those things are made for me. A lot of times we get conversations about specific areas of need within the brewery. The list just keeps growing, and I just keep adding to it at some point. But now that we've got a clear focus, clear vision of directionally where we want to head, especially when it comes to allocating dollars towards innovation and towards spending against new product launches and other things like that, we're able to put more of a finer point to it, and digital becomes one of the better options for it, simply because of the effectiveness of the medium, the fact that it is measurable, the fact that we can define the audience, and hopefully we've got all of that dialed in well in advance, so we're able to make some of those quality decisions. But it's a fight for resources, just like anything else, and we know that we have to provide wholesalers with POS, and we know we have to provide sales incentives and other things that are going to be demands for those budgets. So, but putting the picture together, we see that the pivot's going to continue, and ultimately, I'm trying to invest in upgrading our tools and resources so that we have the ability to make those decisions on a much higher level. And much earlier, ultimately, getting the data in points where we have the ability to visualize, we have the ability to inspect it or break it down or understand, what's the relevance and what's the meaning of going into that particular channel.
Before you do paid media, I mean, the easiest thing to do is have a really kick-ass website. Do that first, solve that, and you're halfway there, right? Make it mobilely optimized, make certain it looks good on mobile, because a lot of the big brands in the world today, they don't have great mobile websites. They suck. It's horrible. They don't load fast enough. So functionally, you own that property, right? Fix it, make it look good, start collecting data from it, do SEO. Make certain people can find it. And, I will tell you that the phrase that pays now in our business is that search is a behavior. It's not an engine. So sure, if you want to stroke a check to Google, that's cool, but also understand that people search everywhere. That's the first thing they do, searching. So if you do pop up and they go directly to your website, or they plug in the website, just make certain that that's optimized, that it has the right keywords, that it's got the right video, the right photos. Collect data on that, and you get to know digital behavior a lot quicker that way. But that's the easiest thing you can do before you pay anybody to do paid media.
I think that's terrific advice, and that's really where we need to invest most of our energy right now. Is it's making sure that we've got all of the little things done the right way, low-hanging fruit, and then ultimately we've always got opportunities to invest, right? There's going to be another channel launched tomorrow that we can figure out, is that the right channel? But right now it has to be about the building blocks to success, doing all the little things right, and then ultimately some of this experimentation around new places, new faces. How do we get more people to discover our brands? But I think you're exactly right. It's about doing all those things first.
So Darrell, I'm bringing you in to give maybe a 5 to 10 minute free consulting session here for Jeremy.
I kind of feel like I've been doing that the whole time. I sort of teed off of that. I'm like, did you know you could do this?
I'm going to show up in Chicago, and we're going to do this.
Hey, man, I have no problem. You buy the beer. It's good.
All right.
What would the brainstorming process look like for you if you were brought in to help Uinta craft a digital and influencer marketing strategy?
Well, I'm telling you, so the construct that I said at the top of this, so discovered, considered, sales, love, that's an easy way to talk about tactics and underlying strategy, right? So you talked about being focused on innovation in the very beginning, right? That can come from just about anywhere, right? Like the brewmaster gets up in the morning and decides that he or she loves the coffee. You know, all of a sudden we have coffee beer the next day. Cool, right? Or, you know, your supply chain guy that sees a package and or your graphic designer sees a color and decides to do something interesting with it. And so, you know, if you take the inspiration and you capture it in that kind of a construct, right? I mean, you have to have those tactics at least figured out somewhat in your brain. So discover, like I said before, you have to be available. So if it's digital, you got to be available online in the digital shelf. But then why the hell are you promoting unless you're available in a particular chain? Or, you know, if you're not, right, on premise, so you focused against one customer. You know, the idea of working with influencers, which was in the discussion, we've kind of lightly talked about that. I'll tell you, you know, media agencies think of influencers as media channels. And while that's cool, you can get reach, you can somewhat maybe own the message. But, you know, look, the days of just doing stuff organically when we did for Pabst, when we brought Pabst back, when I had my own company, it was fun, it was great, but the internet didn't really exist back then. So it was all about, you know, stroking checks and giving people social currency, you know, giving them to promote themselves to do something cool at a bar, and then either, you know, paying them or with swag or something else. Those days are still around, but, you know, the influencer business is such a big business, okay? So if you want to stroke a check for $10,000 for somebody to write something, that's cool, but what is that going to carry over into? So I would argue that in the get considered phase, you could do something like that, but what's the domino effect to that? You don't want to get like coverage over your new package and it's done. Yep. You don't want to talk about, you just have this person talk about stuff or give a tour of your brewery and then it's done. So is it going to be a spark for something else? Because then it moves into sales. So if you can do something in end caps and a particular customer, great. If it's got some sort of thematic around it based on what that blogger wrote or what he or she did in a video, cool, that's the domino effect. So, you know, I heard innovation, I heard influencer marketing, you know, I heard about you having to take care of availability and the sales force, and that's always front and center, but, you know, ultimately some of your owned channels, if you can fix those and get your website up and running the way you need it to, then the sales portion might be a little bit easier because you can tell people where to go, Drizzly, right? Or somewhere else to get it, right? And then the, you know, get love. I mean, that is an ongoing thing. That is, you know, it's constantly making certain you're staying in touch with your consumers face to face or on email. But the underlying, you have to get those business KPIs in order. Like, I want X amount of people to visit my website after I get it done. Cool, okay. I get X amount of people who want to attend a, you know, an event. I've got all of this stuff going on, but those are that KPI scorecard underneath in each and every one of them. But I would, if innovation is so near and dear to you, I'd have that filter. Like, people can just throw tons of ideas at you, and that's cool, but ultimately have that filter around that kind of a construct so that you have an idea of how you want to go to market. And it doesn't have to be just for paid media. It could be a way you build your marketing plan, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
What are one or two questions that entrepreneurs in the room today should ask themselves as they start thinking about...
Why am I doing this? Why don't I have a steady paycheck? That's two, right?
Yeah.
What should they ask themselves? Like, look, ultimately, can you have a conversation with somebody online, or can you use it in an efficient and cheap way? I mean, I mentioned a website. I'll say it again. That's if you fix that, you can drive people to a website, and can you drive them somewhere else after that, right? Do you have somebody dedicated to it? Like, think about the channel first, and then second is dedicated staff to this. And you can't just hire your buddy's friend who happens to code. You can't just hire somebody who is taking pictures on Instagram and it's a friend of a friend. That's bullshit. That's never going to get you anywhere. It just isn't. So hire somebody who has been in the business for a little while and also knows the channels. Believe me, there's a ton of them. We hire them every day, right? You can shape that person because he or she in their 20s is working within these platforms, and then they can get to learn about the platforms and educate you. So, you need somebody who's dedicated to the space. You really do, because there's just too much to catch. I mean, do you guys know that Snap changed their entire interface? I mean, it's all over CNBC. Like, it's freaking news now, right? I mean, it's like there's so much to capture and get educated on these days. So you need somebody who's dedicated to this.
Because people like me couldn't even figure it out.
No, hey, listen,
We're not the audience.
can't. There's just too much. There's too much.
Yeah.
And I think they have to ask themselves too, do you understand your priorities? Do you understand your marketing priorities? And can you relate them to the rest of the organization so the organization can adopt those? Truthfully, marketing is everyone's job within the brewery, right? I mean, we intersect the consumer at so many different points. We want them to go out into the market and preach the same gospel, and we need them to be the advocates on the brewery's behalf. And we've got a lot of work to do just on that piece of it, make sure everyone understands what direction we're headed in, because they all interact on social. They all have the same types of behaviors. They're trying to spread the word too. And I think ask yourself, have you communicated those priorities throughout your organization, and what would you say to the consumer when they did come into the channel? What are you presenting them with, and ultimately?
And that's something simple. You can have a governance guide, right?
Absolutely.
Not social media guidelines. Like, it's governance, right? Like, if a brewmaster is going to be on his or her social channel, like, what do you expect them to say and what not to say, right? It's not the law, but it's a guide, and if everybody's operating off of the same guidebook or governance, then that goes back to your website. That is really, it's an own channel. It's something you can control.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to be able to control it on your Facebook page. You can put shit up there, but nobody's going to see it. Sorry, it's just not going to happen.
How difficult is it to close the loop on all of this? So
Closed loop.
Yes.
They call it attribution. That's the fancy word for attributing success to a particular touch point.
Sure. So I think about it in terms of you have a great idea of, you have a vision for what you want to communicate to customers.
Well,
you have a product that you want to start marketing. You come up with the video package that you're going to deliver to an audience. You pick your platform, and then the ultimate goal is to get them to buy that product. You still have to close the loop off-premise or on-premise, offline, I should say. And then you have to follow it through to the actual transaction of getting that product purchased from the shelf. How difficult is that whole process to go from start to finish?
I could tell you it's not difficult to put it on paper at all. It really isn't. I mean, and I'll bring it back to my time when I was at Goose. I mean, we did this program called 3-1 Tunes. Tony, did I hear you laugh in the audience? No? But the idea was to use the brewery's history of music in the Chicago area to bring independent bands to on-premise locations, right? And in return, the on-premise locations would buy a certain amount, right? We get a tap handle for a certain amount of time, right? That was measurable because we could see what the volume went up around a particular package. It was bottle and then it was keg too. But there was a dedicated microsite for it. There were events that took place, and there was a buy-in from on-premise. And so, it looked good on paper, and we did it in a couple of different neighborhoods, and we saw a measurable increase, right? Now, today, you have many more platforms. You have different types of KPIs. They don't share data with one another. So this goes back to, yes, it looks great on paper, but you need dedicated staff to be able to pull that through and say, all right, let's all agree to a particular KPI, selling volume, but then let's agree to the number of people that are going to visit a website, and you test and learn. So I think it's really freaking easy to put it down in writing. You just have to have somebody who PMs it, project manages it, and polices it. And so, if you have one person running marketing, that's sometimes tough. I would say marketing and sales have to work together for something like this.
There's so many layers that, we're talking about execution, right? I mean, so many layers where things can fall down, and we don't specifically have an opportunity a lot of times to engage directly with the retailer on how a particular display is going up or what the program was, take it all the way back to the very origin of the idea.
Co-op dollars, man.
It's co-op dollars. We're all equally invested.
I know that's dirty, but yeah.
But a lot of the things that we're trying to accomplish we have to get buy-in at so many different levels, and ultimately, it is very tough. So I agree with what you said too, though. From my experience, building an event in my former employer and getting people, it was really about a core group of dedicated people. If you can own the process and establish the KPIs and determine what it is you're trying to accomplish, if you get all of them on board moving in the same direction, you can accomplish some great things.
There's a weird way that we used to do it too. We used to write a press release. We did. It was, and I just read this that Bezos does this too. It's like you write a press release on whatever that announcement is, whatever the product is, and then you just hand it off to your marketing person and have them figure out tactically and the strategy and the KPIs around it. It's kind of cool because it's kind of like giving somebody like a finished package already. Like, oh hey, here's something to aspire to. But it's actually worked in a lot of situations, even on the agency side, where you give them a press release. Here's my solution for the particular client. Let's build to it, and it's worked actually because it's something everybody kind of understands. Or a logo. Sounds really weird, but like here's a logo of what we're going to do, and then everybody rallies around it. But again, going back to staff, it's tough unless you have those people to do that stuff.
Yeah, it seems like just simplifying the process is sometimes
Always.
the best answer.
It's the biggest thing in this business, yeah.
Keeping it very clear, keeping it very articulate the points that you have to make, and get everybody rallied behind it and believing in it. So.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we didn't get enough time to discuss is the influencer world and how brands outside of the alcohol space are playing there. And it sort of is like a little bit of a wild, wild west scenario where there's not a whole lot of metrics to determine how much you should spend on your influencer marketing efforts, how to measure the effectiveness of those campaigns. Darrell, what's your experience been with influencers, and where do you see that going for alcohol brands? Everybody's got a different idea of how that works, right? So it's the pay-to-play right on the platforms, and people use those folks all the time.
My thoughts around this haven't changed in years. I mean, if you want influencers, you got to own your network. And own it's a strong word, but a lot of companies have done it. Goose Island had its own little group of key influencers, right? Greg and Tony and John used to bring everybody together at bars and say, like, try this out, see what it means to you. And then you keep track of those people and work with them. So you bring them in to your fold. I mean, companies like Clorox have had moms and P&G for years, right? Where you have the network of people that you're going to, and you don't just go to them when you need to sell them something. You actually go to them all the time. That's where reputation management comes in, which is another part of a lot of this, where reputation is basically what people are already saying about you. Brand is what you want them to say, right? And so if you can take the reputation piece and create a network that you can own or work with already, and before you launch anything, then they're going to love you a lot more. So all this pay-to-play, it's going to continue. You're still going to see people who are, YouTube influencers, who are Instagram influencers. They have entire conventions from now. VidCon is out here. Creators who are like 7 years old walking around with huge Canon cameras that I want. That business is going to continue to build, and there is something to be said for using those folks and working with them to create that spark. But there's different levels. There's that, and then there's the people that you should be talking to all of the time, even when there's no news. Yeah. We have time for one audience question that came in, and then we got to move on. We talked a lot about picking a KPI and evaluating the effectiveness of a marketing effort based on that KPI. If you have multiple KPIs that you're working with, how do you evaluate the value or appropriateness of the selected KPI? So how do you know you picked the right one, essentially? How do you know you picked the right one? Well, look, there are each campaign that we do, there's either, there's return on ad spend. There's a lot of efficiency metrics. I think for this audience and for this business, it's ultimately about, moving cases, right? And so if you back media metrics into that, you can talk about an action. Hard measurement, like an impression to me isn't a measurement. It just isn't. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, you impressed on somebody, that's what they used to talk about with magazine subscriptions, right? You got X amount of impressions, but how do you know anybody's reading the magazine? So to me, it's all about an action. And so if it's a visit to a website, or it's a consumption of a particular video, and then it's a sale in a store, you wrap those up into performance KPI. Just think about it as performance. And so to me, it's always about an action, not anything that's soft, period.
Nice. Jeremy, Darrell, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate the
Appreciate
time.
it. Likewise.
Cool. Thanks. Okay.
Cheers.
There you go.
Thank you.